Hey Bitstocks family, it's Damon here from the design team. Today, I'm answering another of your frequently asked questions. What rules and regulations is Gravity covered by? Most importantly, Bitstocks is registered with the FCA as an EMD agent of modular finance. You can find us on the FCA online register here. This means that we are required to comply with Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering directives and are able to distribute or redeem e-money and provide certain payment services on behalf of an e-money institution. E-money institutions are not covered by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme because they are not classed as a bank. However, our customers may file a report with the Financial Ombudsman Service if they believe they have grounds for a complaint. You can rest assured that our compliance team is always working hard behind the scenes to ensure that all our activities here at Gravity are fully regulated. That's it for now. Hope you enjoy your podcast and catch you soon.
Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Bitstocks Podcast. And I am your well-tanned host today. And I have none other than Nathan Cropper of Paragon Banking Group, who is a financial crime expert. And as you guys will all know, everything that's going on in the industry right now, especially in particular the UK with Binance, I think this is a very fitting conversation. So Nathan, you caught me on, was it the FinTrail?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was
right?
the FinTrail panel,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
That was interesting. That
Yeah.
was very interesting. So it's a financial crime panel that I spoke on, and I always come in as kind of like the outsider with new ideas. But you've been very much part of this world now for the last close to a decade,
few years,
right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that on that particular panel, it was you describing every other crypto as a shitcoin, which made me think, hold on a second, what is this guy talking about? I've never heard anybody speak so bluntly about the space, and why is it that he is saying that, right? So
before we get into me, I appreciate that. But before we get into me, tell us a little bit about yourself. So what's your history, and how did you come to be with what you're doing right
well, I never intended to be in the financial crime space. I ended up studying how to make computer games. But I assume that due to the 2008, 2009 financial instability that we all experienced, it kind of moved my path into a different direction.
How old are you?
36.
Okay, so you're my generation of gaming then.
I'm your generation of gaming, exactly.
What, PlayStation or Sega Saturn? Which one was you?
I was always Nintendo. I never...
Oh, you did PS? Oh, you straight to
I never
Nintendo?
actually had a Playstation.
No way.
I never
so
had
you
a
got Super
PlayStation.
Nintendo to N64?
Super Nintendo, N64, GameCube. I'm on that lineage.
Okay.
But yeah, so after not being able to fulfill my desires of wanting to work in the games industry, of which I trained to become a designer because I really like to think about different things, I started to question, well, how is it that we're having this instability? Where the hell is all the money in the world going to? And like, how is it working? Why is it doing this? That kind of put me down a little bit of a campaign down the whole financial crime route to find out, well, there must be something foul at play.
Nice.
I read a book called Serious Organized Crime by Misha Glenny. And every single chapter of that book literally blew my mind wide open as to how easy it was. If you were in the right place at the right time, and if you had the skill set, you could become an overnight millionaire from illicit activity. It was a really lovely book, kind of went through the geographical changes and how that opened up different opportunities to people. So yeah, with that in mind, I kind of pursued a career within Barclays and kind of went through the different stages.
Financial intelligence unit, right?
So I first started off working in the anti-money laundering team. Transaction monitoring system will ping an alert across to you, investigate, report or not. Then kind of moved into a little bit more of a different team called the consent team, which is now called the Defense Against Money Laundering.
Okay.
And essentially that put me in the first sort of proactive position where if I suspected the money on an account was illicit, then I could take that money away from somebody and submit a report to law enforcement saying, can we give it back? And it was around that sort of time period that I first started to come into transactions involving Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And sort of the first knee-jerk reaction, which all banks and even still right now, a lot of people still have, is, we're seeing activity We don't know what it is. We don't like it. And we're going to close the account down and we'll submit a defensive SAR.
So how long ago? So when you first started to get the crypto and the Bitcoin influence, how long ago was this?
Man, that must have been around 2013, maybe 2014.
Wow.
I think.
Okay. It's pretty early days.
Yeah, pretty early.
So this would have been people like doing weird bank transfers. To weird locations, like it would have been Eastern Europe, like Poland, Bulgaria, Isle of Man at one point were quite active, Gibraltar. But then it's like using weird remittance companies to then send money to companies in Asia.
With really weird remittance narratives.
Okay.
And it's by searching those narratives that you're able to then do some open source research and see exchanges. And you're just like, what the hell is even going on here?
So what are conversations like? So when you first saw these things, I mean, what was your first like immediate reaction?
I thought it was exciting. Personally, myself, I was like, whoa, we're seeing the birth of something new here. No idea what it is. But like I mentioned, a lot of the initial reaction was to submit a report of suspicious activity, and potentially even close down the account. And it was that side which I didn't really feel too comfortable with engaging in. So time has gone on, and I then managed to join up into the FIU.
Okay,
fantastic team, best team in the industry.
Yeah,
and but it put me into a position where I was actually able to do something proactive to look at this space. And I undertook a very ambitious task of trying to map all of the transactions that the bank was exposed to in the whole Bitcoin space, crypto space. So that would have involved taking all the open source intelligence that I could find on the entities, the company registration details, the people behind the businesses, for as many exchanges that I could find. It was a huge list of maybe around 200 plus. And surprise, surprise, the bank was exposed to a lot of crypto related activity.
Yeah.
Now, the bank wouldn't have known this, right? A lot of this activity is nested. Banks are very complicated, correspondent banking. And then you have, other banks who bank within the bank, who then have customers who then provide, this nested relationship. So being able to pull out all these transaction data and say, hey, we have all of this exposure, boom, do something about that. But then also put me into a really good position to react when something bad happens. So in this scenario, we had the exchange BTCE.
I was wondering, I was going to ask, when I was explaining like the remittance, the weird companies in between, the first company that came to mind was BTCE.
BTCE, okay. I mean, they handled a lot of illicit Bitcoin transactions, to say the least. Didn't have any KYC, AML or anything like that, Now, some people will say, well, they were the most popular exchange at the time, and there would have been some legitimate transactions mixed up in there, but I mean, that's neither here nor there from my perspective.
I mean, the coins even used to trade at a premium to factor in the risk that things that were going on there were very underhand. Like that was a known, if you're there, you're doing something dodgy. Like even from a trading, like if you're there, you're doing something dodgy. So they had a really bad reputation.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense because the transactions which I had identified involved an individual receiving a very large portion of money into his account. And this individual, using one of the blockchain analytics firms, I was able to identify his Bitcoin address, was able to track that money which he had withdrawn from BTC into his account all the way back to the Silk Road.
So what was that experience like? So now you're using, I assume, Chainalysis.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
As a tool, as a financial crime expert, how did you perceive that tool? And then how did that change your opinion about what blockchain technology is, or did it?
Well, it did. And it for me at that time, it was like, well, this is great. I can actually provide a context around the activity, right? It's no longer simply a suspicion. I'm looking at this and saying, this is fact. And then when I looked at his KYC information, this guy declares that he's a biochemist. Yeah. So I'm like, wow, okay, biochemist, Silk Road, BTCE, account, Ferrari, right? This is Walter White, isn't it? So now it enabled me to really put that into what I would call necessary. I'd kind of describe it as maybe the first intelligence-based SAR involving that activity, especially within Barclays UK maybe at the time, because it was totally different to the knee-jerk sort of reaction of activity, close, out, gone. we're able to now contextualize and say, we know that this person who's received this money into his account came from the Silk Road and he says he's a biochemist. There's something strange about that, right? So I was actually quite proud about doing that. But this huge amount of research and analysis had to be done first to be able to pull out this one customer at the end. So yeah, that was a really interesting experience. So from my position, I'm like, well, there's a lot more that we could be learning about this whole industry. And in my mind, I was like, in addition to that, not only just learning about it, maybe it could actually help to make the whole AML regime a lot more efficient.
Absolutely.
Because at the moment, it is not very efficient. Regardless of all the good work that my colleagues, the people who are across the industry are doing, 99.95% of all the money still gets to go without any prosecution.
Because you're working with fragmented systems, and with a fragmented system, you then rely on the honesty of the gatekeepers, right? So one bank communicates with another bank, one bank communicates with a regulator communicates with an auditor, right? All gatekeepers, right? And even if everyone is relatively on the same harmonious, transparent page, right? You can still have things that slip through the net. And the only innovation, and this is why I was calling everything shitcoins, the only innovation, the real innovation of Bitcoin isn't cryptography. In fact, it's not even a crypto coin. There's no cryptography there. It's that it is a public ledger. It's public, it's open, it's transparent. It took the most archaic piece of technology, a piece of paper, and it made it public, right? And if you draw a line in between that piece of paper, and you've got inputs on one side, you've got outputs on the other side, now I've got a ledger, right? But in order for a ledger to be useful, cool, I can read it, but there needs to be something to read. So you need a pen to write on a ledger, and that's what the tokens are.
Mm-hmm.
Thing is that we all got so caught up in the monetization of the pen that everyone's running around looking for that diamond encrusted Cartier pen, right? Which right now, $34,000 Bitcoin's priced at, right? But what they've done is they've made the utility of that pen nigh on useless because you can only do 3 to 4 transactions a second. That the only thing it is being used for now is like high value transactions and all these other things. So then you have this technology that is a public record that ultimately records time, because in order for something to have relevance, you need to record it went from this place to this place, right? And you need to have a timestamp and a date in order for it to have relevance. It's like if I said Lamborghini goes from 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, right? The thing that gives it meaning is 2.5 seconds, right? Because otherwise, if I just say, oh yeah, Lamborghini goes from like 0 to 60 and I don't finish the sentence, it doesn't fucking mean anything, right? Bitcoin records a transaction, when it took place, what the destination is, and it records it for all memory, for all time. So when someone like you then goes into the system and says, okay, well, let me trace back what's going on here. Every movement, every possible movement is on that record, on that ledger, right? But the great thing about it as well is that every single component of a Bitcoin, because one Bitcoin has 100 million bits, which we call Satoshis, which means that every single, kind of think of it like cells in the body, right? You identify as being Nathan as at the macro scale, but at your, say, cellular level, you're 100 trillion cells, right? Yeah. Each one of those are connected. That then at the macro scale, give me the image of you. Like each one of those are freaking connected. In Bitcoin, it's the same. So you can actually trace from one cell and rebuild Nathan, right? But we need to make it easier, more harmonious to do that. And once I think regulators, banks, etc., realize the power of that, I think some of them have, which is another conversation which I actually want to get into.
Yeah,
I think the technology is too transparent, and that's going to pose a problem for our banks.
Well, just banks, or
I think government, everyone.
Because isn't one of the challenges here with Bitcoin? How am I able to determine who the owner is at which time? Right. So at least now, when I'm performing some sort of analysis, I could see that all of these transactions are from this person. I can see which person is in control of what.
Yeah.
Whereas I could
control of what, when.
What,
right?
Well, what? Yeah.
What and when? Yeah.
Well, let's put it like this. You have a corp, and this is where it becomes even more difficult when you're trying to do like an efficient AML sort of regime, because you have a lot of these great, transaction monitoring rules and legislation and everything else, but the way that they sort of manifest is monitoring on the individual. And when it comes to monitoring legal entities, it's not that efficient.
Okay.
If we say there are 10 companies who all transact 100,000 6 times a day for 6 months straight, 2 of those are bad. Which one is it?
Yeah.
How are you supposed to find that out? And so when we then scale that and say, well, actually, there's millions upon millions of businesses, and with some of those businesses, there is a possibility that you can remain anonymous, right? Which is where all these Panama Papers and everything else is kind of blowing the lid on offshore entities and how they're constructed. How can we then translate this problem into, or how can we translate this problem to be fixed by the blockchain and Bitcoin when the beginning is already so bloody complicated? Majority of the money is not laundered by people. Yes, people launder money, but it is what they have birthed, being the legal entities, which we've seen when it comes to things like the Russia laundromat, Moldovan banking scandal. They use legal entities to transfer the money and move it around.
Absolutely. So let's go back then to what got you here in the first place, right? Because you said you had a fixation with the monetary system, how the monetary system works. And then you've gone straight into financial crime to understand the monetary system better, right? So where has that thought process evolved to? Like, what is your actual present understanding of the monetary system?
Man, that is a hell of a question. If we...
Oh, we got time, bro. Let's unpack this one, because this is why Bitcoin is relevant. So let's unpack that.
Well, let's
and then I'll tell you why Bitcoin fixes it.
Yeah, let's try to unpack it, because to understand that is to also then understand law.
Yep.
Right. And so if we take the example of a limited liability partnership, which is presently the only business type in the UK where you may still be able to have a degree of anonymity if there is no person of significant control. Right? Now, you take that legal framework and you look at all the other jurisdictions around the world, another 16 jurisdictions where they have something similar, which allow you to create a legal entity and have another legal entity being its owner.
Yeah.
Not everybody around the world has made the steps to make a person of significant control visible on that entity.
Yeah.
Let alone even having a fully public company registration database. So for me, it's almost like how can
you
Bitcoin,
throw trust structures into the mix of that as well, and
you throw all these things. It's a very complicated system. So how is it that you can sort of enable the responsibility or the accountability of those vehicles being misused? Because was there a legitimate reason why an LLP didn't need to have a natural person behind it?
Yeah.
Some people will say yes. Some people could say, well, the simple fact that you're providing an even slight level of anonymity, you are enabling it to be misused. And eventually we'll get to this part of the conversation, which is going to be BTC diversion away from white paper, more and more steps, which appear to me to be creating a more an anonymity within BTC as opposed to what should be. And we're almost seeing a recreation of what's already been done inside traditional finance.
It's really interesting that you picked up on that. So, okay, so you're not a BSV person, are you?
I literally only started looking at BSV in the last few months, and really is off the back of you calling everything else a shitcoin.
Good. I'm glad. But you was having these kind of thought process about BTC prior to being exposed to BSV, right?
I would say that, like a lot of people who are looking into the whole Bitcoin and crypto world, there's so much euphoria, so much dreams of what could be possible. And then as the market continues to pump and dump and pump and dump, slowly you start to realize actually that there really isn't any utility here.
No. So what they are doing, they are recreating exactly what you've just said, right? So I've come from a position to get to here, not too dissimilar to you. I had a real fixation with the monetary system, but my introduction to it was quite unconventional, to say the least. My upbringing definitely shaped it. Just seeing how the lack of money in the household caused certain behaviors in adults that it shouldn't have caused. But But then I had a very vivid introduction because I met an individual called Gary McKinnon when I was 16, 17. He orchestrated the largest military hack in human history, hacked NASA. When Obama took office in 2008, he tried to throw him in Guantanamo Bay, right? Banned him from the internet, gone on for ages.
Ain't no red dots inside it, right? Bloody hell.
Yeah, like he tried to throw him in Guantanamo Bay. Like Obama came in and went in. It's like, yo, get this man in Guantanamo. He bought his computer equipment from my uncle's computer store, which I used to work there on a Saturday. This is in North London, okay? Palmer's Green, North London. So I was a hacker at the time, nerd. I used to piss around the school systems, change a couple grades here and there. So I had the opportunity to ask him, I was like, dude, like, one, why the fuck did you hack NASA? Secondly, like, what did you see? Yeah. He told me he saw pre and post Photoshop images on the moon, right? You probably wonder, why are we talking about the moon when we're talking about monetary system? We'll get there. We'll get there. And long story short on the moon stuff, basically his whole fixation is we're not alone. And he went off and validated that we are not alone. And he gave me that information when I was like 16, 17. We are not freaking alone, okay? But I already knew that. That's not what got me going. I was like, I already kind of perceived that myself. What I found really fascinating was if we do have access to this technology and we do have what he described as being off-planet operatives, bases on the moon, right? My whole thing was, how the fucking hell are we paying for this, right? Then I thought more deeply. I was like, started to study World War II. I started to realize that Hitler's sending armadas to Antarctica in the middle of World War II. Yeah. And I realized that Hitler's really into biblical artifacts. And
oh gosh, we're getting very strange all of a sudden, right?
Here we are.
It's very serious.
And what people deem to be, if you're on this side of the money printing table, right? It's not about money because it has no cost of creation. Mm-hmm. And then I started to realize all money does is measure time, right? It measures humans' productivity. And the way that we price time is effectively energy, labor, and the skill it takes to perform labor, right? And then you have a monetary system where you've got human beings on a hamster wheel all competing in labor markets. And depending on how skillful somebody is, I, as an employer, say it would take less time for this individual to perform the laborsome tasks. That I would pay you 80,000 a year. I'll pay you 100,000 a year because I'm getting more extraction from you in a lesser amount of time. All money does is price time. But the problem is on the planet Earth, we've got 192 different ways of pricing time. We have dominant frequencies, USD, Euro, GBP, Chinese yuan, right? And they all compete to be the dominant frequency on the planet. But then we as human beings, when we get into positions of power, we've absorbed enough energy, we've acquired enough energy that we call money, then a wealthy man or woman has to make a decision. They say, okay, I'm gonna go live in Monaco, I'm gonna go live in Dubai, I'm gonna go live in Belize, right? What we're doing, we're going to these locations where I expend the same time, the same labor, but I'm getting more energy for my labor, right? Because taxes are different, etc. So it changes our behavior without even realizing how much it changes our behavior. We're all looking for a greater return on time, right? But then I see like the global agenda, which is, okay, we want one world currency, right? If we have a one world currency without a transparent foundation, human beings will fall into the ultimate form of slavery, right? Where you're not going to have much to say on the rising rate of inflation, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that bread and eggs every single year when I go to the supermarkets are more expensive. But when I speak to a farmer, I say, listen, are you doing anything different with your time? I wake up at 4 a.m. I go sort out my fields. I go sort out my livestock. Their life hasn't changed for hundreds of years, potentially thousands. Their life has not changed. It's the unit of measure that we're pricing their labor against, which is changing, right? So money, and when we don't have a truly free capitalist society, money is our form of enslavement.
Do you not think that the interaction of money is part of the human condition, though? Mm-hmm. Right? Because we don't pay a cow. We don't pay a cow for giving us that milk. It's only between humans that we have this issue.
it smooths out the ability for human beings to communicate because we need a measurement to communicate value, right? And time is the ultimate measurement, but we need a way of pricing time, right?
Yeah.
So if I have a cow and I got to chop it up into like all of these different pieces, it's very different than you gutting a fish.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And also it's a completely different quantity in comparison to you gutting a fish. So we've got to find a rate of measure to smooth out the process. So I'm not against money at all. I love money, right? But what I'm advocating is we need a more accurate and harmonious way of quantifying time on the planet. And what Bitcoin got introduced to the world as is a timekeeping ledger.
That's right. Yeah.
That's why I keep making the connection to time, right? Because if Bitcoin is a time stamping ledger, it harmonizes time. You can't say this event didn't happen. There's proof that an event happened. So if we could then put as many interactions on that ledger as possible, right? Then now you have and this is where I think what the banks really don't like, is that there is a token embedded into this system that with enough velocity can eventually become a greater, more harmonious measurement of time on the planet for human beings, right? And we call that the Satoshi, right? The unit of account. But right now, a Satoshi is way too freaking volatile.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's right.
So the only thing we need a Satoshi to do right now is to do what is best at, the utility of recording time, right? So we have to be able to use the smallest unit. I said to you, right now I'm engaging with the macro scale of Nathan. Cool. But you are a composition of 100 trillion cells. Each one of those cells is freaking valuable. Each one of those cells is valuable. So in Bitcoin, cool, I could take a cell and I could use it in order to write on a ledger and make a recording. Okay. But I need to be able to use 100 trillion at once. Right. I need to be able to use billions at once, at least a couple 100,000 at once per second. I genuinely believe that the powers that be, who are the masters of pricing time and keeping time very confused on this planet, understood how threatening this technology is and have neutered it. And they had to make sure that it could only record 3 to 4 timestamps a second, right? And this is what you're picking up on, because if you can't utilize the ledger to its full degree, then they're going to try to offer different forms of technical solutions simulate the same thing.
To simulate the same thing,
exactly. So this was introduced as something called Lightning Network. And Lightning Network, basically, you need to have e-money license. You need to have a money transmitting license to run a Lightning node, because basically you're gatekeeping now, right? What they've done is they said, okay, we've got this public ledger.
This is just in the UK though, right? To have
this will eventually be global, but if the technology worked, it will require people to get the licenses global. But the technology don't even freaking work. It's been coming for 18 months for
I read something the other day that suggested that even the developers are saying, if you don't put your money inside it unless you want your money to disappear just by a random bug. Yeah. It's like, what the hell is that about?
It's a bunch of, to be honest with you, it's been quite a emotional ride, because I'm very fueled by humanity needs this technology, right? Because this technology makes humanity honest. It makes banks honest, and I'll explain what we're doing on it as well in a bit. It makes politicians honest. It makes our supply chains honest.
Well, how would you say it could potentially make people honest or rather it just makes it more visible that people are dishonest? Maybe if we put it that way.
Exactly that.
And
I think that probably is a better way.
Are we prepared? Are we prepared to actually see just how many dishonest people there are?
No.
Right? We're not prepared for that. And some of the things that I've been sort of grappling with is, like many people, I was one of the few who had never understood or read the white paper, right? You have to admit that, right? That's the majority of people. But as I
even now today, dude, like most people do not understand.
Even now, no, of course. Yeah. I mean, look, I only started to really understand what the hell was happening within the whole blockchain space of this hash war and everything else only very recently. And it wasn't until this this court case that Craig won, this default court case that he won against this Cobra Bitcoin guy. I had no idea who the hell this Cobra Bitcoin person was. And then because of this court case, I have then found out that he back in 2017 said BTC is no longer like the white paper, therefore we should update it so we don't mislead people. I'm like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
Right? So
also, Cobra, the reason why you don't know who Cobby is and the reason why he didn't appear in court is because he wants to maintain his anonymity. right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, this is something, right? Do you think in the future there should be such a thing as digital anonymity?
no. Well, this is such a hot topic. This is such a hot topic. This is such a hot
How far
topic.
should privacy go?
Every human being by default is entitled and must defend vigorously their privacy.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
From banks, from governments, from everyone. We must defend our privacy, our right to privacy. If we must trust our legal systems to be honest and our legal systems to be efficient. Meaning that if there is a subpoena out for my ass, right, because I'm suspected of doing something wrong, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Those records need to be displayed. But only if the legal system is followed and honored, then you get access to seeing what has Michael Hudson been up to, right? It shouldn't be a case of, we can see everything just for the sake of we can see everything, right?
Yeah.
And this is where the blockchain, and by blockchain specifically, I'm speaking about Bitcoin here, is as a ledger that can record movement. What gives movement context is all of these movements effectively have a human being behind it, which means at some given point that is representing that is somebody's property, right? And so therefore what it's there to do is enforce property rights, right? So in order to have property rights enforced, you cannot be anonymous. How can someone make a claim to something and not have an ID associated to it?
Right? That's right. Yeah.
And this is the fallacy in cryptocurrencies, and they think that keys is law. It's bollocks. Because if I give you my Porsche key, right, and you go take my car for a joyride and stack it, right? Well, does that mean that you own my car?
Well, could I just not give the key to somebody else and say that they own it?
Well, exactly.
This is the thing in crypto, right?
This is what they're doing. They're just passing the key over.
Possession is not ownership.
Yeah, everyone thinks they own my Porsche. And all I'll do is I'll pick up the phone to the police. I say, listen, someone's nicked my car. They've taken it out for a joyride, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Can you go recover my property, please? Right. And as long as I prove that I am the person who's on the database, the police will go off and they'll redeem and they'll recover my property.
Yeah.
Bitcoin was designed to work exactly like this. But in order to enforce that, ironically, you need a bank. This is like our approach. This is why we're building Gravity.
To onboard. To provide that legal
to onboard, to pair
point of pairing.
To pair the physical Nathan with the new digital Nathan, right? And the way that we're doing this, we introduce something called GravityID, right? So you have your own digital avatar of yourself, but it's pairing your ID now with your blockchain representative.
So how do you feel then about the whole self-hosted wallets, right? Because
it's bollocks.
Because people are now looking at that as high risk. There's a website called Bitaddress, I think it's called, bitaddress.org. It's been around for quite a while, but you could just simply move your mouse very quickly and then bam, you've created a new address.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, but you've got to look at a wallet in the same way that this is, right?
Yeah.
So with a physical wallet, I could go down to say, in fact, Barclays, use Barclays as an example, right? I go to Barclays, my wealth is in Barclays, right? And let's just say Barclays wanted to incentivize me. They wanted to give me a nice little freebie. They give me a wallet, right, with Barclays branding on it. Okay. Here, Michael, thank you for signing up your account. And we'll give you 0.01% interest a year. And here's your physical wallet.
Sounds pretty good.
With Barclays branding on it. So I walk out. I've got now my Barclays wallet and I go to the cash point. I withdraw 50 quid.
Okay.
Now, in that wallet, I'm never ever going to have more than a couple $100 at any given point. In that wallet, right? Anyone who carry around like thousands of pounds in a physical wallet, it's questionable, right? A wallet is designed to have petty cash, right? I'm gonna carry around petty cash. People utilizing wallets online should be the same way. It should be petty cash.
But there's no controls around that.
There is no controls around that.
Right, so they can use it however.
That they themselves have to be in control of managing that process. And this is where people have little vision as to what this world is really about and where this world is truly going. Have you seen Ready Player One? The movie, Spielberg. Okay, brilliant. We are at Nintendo 64 of that world, okay? And we've got a horse in a race at the Nintendo 64 level, but I know that in the next 3-4 years, maximum 5, we'll be at PS5 level,
okay,
right? In the sense of you being so merged between the physical and the non-physical, right? And I'm saying right now we're at Nintendo 64 level, but it's freaking happening.
It's something kind of I described to you when we were sharing some messages, trying to figure out how to describe the space, let's say, and almost seeing it as a meshing of your physical and the digital to have some sort of monetary aspect to you creating all the data.
Absolutely.
Which is that's mind-blowing to me. But one of the things that I am aware of as being a challenge, let's say for right now, as the world is going through that evolution, is a lot of the people who are going to be hurt during that movement, that transition from traditional world into that world, right? So, for example, fraud, in my opinion, is a huge, huge problem within this space at the moment.
Massively.
It's so big. It's so big, and it's almost like it's become so normalized.
Yeah.
Rug pulls, pump and dumps, shit coins. Like how has this now become normal? Exchange blackouts, right? We're seeing corruption on so many levels, and people are being stung.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I am to become a victim of a fraud and I've lost £5,000, the fraudster has tricked me. I was vulnerable because I didn't understand what I was doing. How could I ever get that back?
Well,
you can't.
No. See, potentially you can, right? Well, with Bitcoin, you can. And this is what Craig's going through the process of one of his other court cases, tied in with coins that were stolen from him, connected to Mt. Gox, where, because he understood the system enough that he can actually say, it's not just a case of the blockchain records where every interaction has ever taken place. So if I say this interaction right there, I own those coins. That was my property, right? Keys and being in possession of the keys is just like the Porsche scenario.
Yeah,
right?
Not everybody is Craig in this respect, and I'm sure that he's got all the information to back himself up in that respect.
But this is the example that needs to be demonstrated and shown.
Yeah,
right? And exactly, everyone isn't Craig, so we need a more simple, elegant solution. Which is going to be a nice plug for mine in a bit. But what Craig is going to do, he's going to set a precedent. And he's going to rewrite everyone's brain and show them through example that is $4 billion worth of value that got stolen from him, okay, how you can actually retrospectively redeem your property that was once stolen from you. Because if you assign your identity to something that was on this ledger, right, then through the legal process, the miners will have to honor a court order to have those coins returned to their original owner.
Okay, so in this example then, I mean, look, that's a lot of money, which means that there's going to be a lot of fees which are being paid to legal professionals to do so. How on earth is Mrs. Miggins going to be able to do that if she's lost £3,000 to an investment scam? When already right now, blockchain analysis companies won't be able to say, we'll take on your case. There's nobody as acting as an escrow or intermediary to help them in that respect. Even the police can't do anything.
There's too many of them.
There's too many of them.
It's a baptism of fire. And it's going to be, this is why we've had our media organization for as long as we have. We've tried to speak on this for years on end, trying to warn people. But it's all well and good just trying to speak on it. You have to build a viable solution to show people, okay, this is how it's meant to be done, right? And the only thing that they can do is make that transition. And they will have to make the transition anyway, because the transition will be invisible. It's at least that's how we're going to integrate it, because you will create your own digital avatar. As soon as you've got your own digital avatar, you are now prepared, because it's not just about the money that you have lost. Once people realize that this is the new internet being reborn, then it's actually your data. What about if one of these transactions were associated to a piece of data that was very important to you? So the concept of managing your own fund or being your own bank is effing retarded, especially when you factor in a data conversation. Because now let's say you're being audited and there's something that's a transaction associated like years in the past that you don't remember what the Trezor color looks like, let alone actually have access to that Trezor anymore. And you've just done things in such a chaotic way, trying to maintain anonymity or your illusion of what privacy should be, but really just anonymity and chaos. You can't do your tax returns properly. If you get questioned, you get audited. You ain't gonna be able to adequately answer as to why. And some of these things might be really freaking important to you from a data standpoint, let alone just a monetary standpoint. NFTs is an example of a new area in this technology where we're bringing a lot of mainstream attention, where it's actually more about the data that's giving the value as opposed to the coin now. So in order to merge everything together, we have to go to the very primitives, the basic primitives, which are, what is this technology here to enforce? The technology is here to enforce property rights. And the only way you can actually maintain property rights is if you associate your identity. But the big fear that everyone has been sold, this is why they've gone down the be your own bank route, is that if it is on the blockchain and it's not encrypted, then you're vulnerable because it's all on a public record. It's all on a public ledger. So for instance, us with Gravity, we are putting our banking infrastructure on top of Bitcoin SV, on top of this blockchain, which means we're not going to wait to be audited every single year like other banks, or every single quarter, give that long time window to let the regulators, to let the auditors come in, slip them a nice little bit of cash and say, can you cook my books around this way or that way? We're going to get it down to the point where we're being audited every single 10 minutes, right? All of our records are all on chain, all on a public ledger. It is impossible for us to commit fraud without flagging something within a 10-minute window. Right? So we're adhering to the system in the most
So you're setting a very, very high standard.
Very high standard.
So this is something that's interesting, right? Because the more people that actually understand that though, or actually see the benefit of it or feel the benefit of that, then I could imagine there'll be a lot more people who would move into the space. But grappling with the financial system itself is a challenge. Then you have technical stuff thrown on top. I mean, there's still a huge number of people who are not literate with technology at all, right? And I'm looking forward to the days where that reality is the technology is as simple for a grandparent to use, right? Or
6 months.
Child to use.
6 months, bro.
Right?
6 months. 6 months would be as easy as signing up to Monzo. Your experience would be like Monzo. And in order to create your digital avatar, it's like taking a selfie.
Okay.
Take a selfie, your avatar's created. It would be like grandma in a kind of Pixar-like avatar, and you're ready for this new world, completely.
So how do you foresee some of the future challenges within this space? If we take something like Twitch, for example, the reality that if I am an ideologically possessed individual and I want to fundraise without people directly knowing that I might do something bad with the money that they will provide to me through likes or whatever else, I might just say, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
People think that's a positive thing. It might not be. They all like or retwitch, branch whatever I've put there. It generates me enough that I'm able to go out and buy a knife. I go and I stab some people. I commit a terrorist attack off the back of that. How is it that the industry is going to be able to contend with this reality, right? I'm not too sure if we psychologically or even philosophically are even prepared for this reality where your simple actions online are not just you creating, putting opinions online, but you're actually now able to monetize those and generate income, which could potentially encourage an individual to do something, right?
Absolutely.
You take another really crazy example and say the issues with, teenagers, young people, and suicide is crazy. These sort of games that they play online is a real thing. Will there ever be a scenario in the future where if I don't receive this many likes, I'm going to jump, right? Because that many likes can return a certain amount of, right? Maybe one person gets it. Other people think, well, that's a great way for me to get some exposure, get some money.
Absolutely. One thing I can guarantee is we can never control the actions of another human being.
No,
what we can do, however, is put in frameworks to give a accurate, predictable outcome. So example of this would be, if you go to a nightclub and they don't take ID at the door, how do you feel going into that nightclub? It's like, at any given point, something might fucking pop off. Right? I don't know what someone's got. I don't know who what's. I just expect, and it always has been, a very different, wild environment in there. Because people walk into that club with a degree of anonymity, right? They know that, okay, there's no cameras. I wasn't checked at the door. There is no scan of my identity. If I act up, I got a good chance of getting out of here, right? Festival, same thing. If identity is taken, there's a degree of calm in that nightclub because of accountability, retrospective accountability, right? Exactly the same. But you need to have an identity, right? And this is where it's all going, because the regulators are going to catch up.
Okay.
These shit coins, as we call them, that enable anonymity, and these bucket shop exchanges that facilitate money laundering and connect, you've gone in with Monero, now you're going out with Bitcoin, right? And they're cutting that gap in the middle. They're not going to be able to do that anymore, because the standard would be is that, okay, you're creating your digital representative now, because the things that you are accruing and the value that you're accruing, this is why I love NFTs, because it's making people think about value differently.
Okay.
Right? If you own a Van Gogh, you want people to know that you own a Van Gogh. You're not going to use an anonymous handle to store that. You might not tell people that you own it, but you most certainly going to ensure that if anything ever happened to it, you want to make sure that you can redeem it.
That's right.
So your identity is going to be associated for your own selfish reasons, right? Because that's your property.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a fundraising, your example, okay, well, where we see things going, this is why we're building GravityID, right? Is you make that exclusive to GravityID users. And you can only go over a certain bracket if you're a GravityID user. On our NFT exchange, you have to be a GravityID user in order to mint. In order to be a seller, you need to be an ID user,
Okay.
right? So you can be a buyer if you log in through, say, Google, log in through Facebook, if you pay on a credit or debit card, because there's a certain degree of identity. But if you're a seller, you've got to be a GravityID user.
Right. Okay.
Because
So, I understand what you're saying there, but if we now take it into another example and say, well, how about Hamas opening up an account? Are we going to be maintaining the same barriers of entry to people getting on chain? Right?
What? So a known terrorist group.
A known terrorist
group.
Or let's say they don't even come on the chain as Hamas. They come on as something else. But then after you realize it, they are.
But this is the thing.
You can masquerade as whatever, right?
But you're Nathan, and every single 100 trillion cells, right? That makes you, right? In this example, in this world, you cannot disconnect any cell. We are all acting as one, right? So it's like if you go to a shop and I pay for, say, a packet of crisps with a £10 note, okay? I don't know, and it's completely accepted today that we don't know who used that £10 note last.
Well,
it could have been like a granny who might have had a coke addiction and used a £10 note to sniff it up her nose. It could have been involved in multiple drug transactions prior, right?
Possibly.
So we accept that because of the way that system works, you can't penalize that individual if that note was involved in a
we don't even
prior,
think about it.
Right? We don't even think about it. This actually is where it gets a little bit worrying, to the point where I think we could even have a little too much transparency.
Well,
right?
this is exactly one of my concerns, and I think a lot of people, which is sort of maybe justifying their movements to try and create that level of anonymity, which is why I'm sort of questioning where is the boundary for privacy? How deep can it go to ensure that the integrity of the system is maintained? Is the financial system only as able to maintain such a level of integrity? Is questionable, but because there is cash. And once that is totally removed, then what does that mean?
Well, they're going completely cashless, which means that they're going to be able to see everything, right? If we go completely digital based on their system, they will be able to see everything. There will be no areas where we can maintain a degree of privacy through, like, say, a cash-based system, right? And that's why people, if you're still positive and you're using cash, people like the privacy aspect of it, right? Obviously, cash predominantly, I'll argue, is used for more illicit transactions for those reasons, because of the privacy aspect. But governments removing the privacy aspect and us going completely digital worries me. And in fact, us as a solution, we've actually aggressively attacked this space and built a solution to be viable for when we are stepping into this arena. There's already a lot of strong talk about government coins now at the highest level, central bank digital currencies.
That's right, yeah.
Now, they're going to have more transparency between banks. They'll be easier for them to settle in between banks. Great. But it means that we are going to lose all of our privacy as users.
Maybe. And I say maybe because the sheer vast number of transactions, you can hide within that. You can maintain anonymity within the herd, right? And it will only be the people around the peripheries who are doing stuff which warrants somebody to take your money will be the ones who will stick out, right? So from that perspective, it will be easier to create transaction monitoring and that sort of stuff to identify those people who are on the peripheries.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is what I find really exciting about that aspect, because once they all become API driven, super digital driven, we can actually slot in the missing piece with all of this. Because once we've got a hyper efficient traditional banking system that's been now upgraded, and even though they're going down the wrong route with cryptocurrencies, they're just going to make their system more palatable for like companies like ours, where we can plug into those API endpoints. And basically any money that's in the bank is just a pool. It's just a pool of cash, right? Just
that's right, yeah.
So if I put a blockchain layer above it, okay, I'm basically auditing and giving a more accurate representation of this liquidity pool of cash. So as this pool doesn't move, and all the interactions now are going to happen on this network above that we call the blockchain and new internet, which we're calling the metanet in the BSV space, right? Well, if I take the GBP system and I pair it with this system, I've got now the benefits of Bitcoin, meaning I could go to the 8th decimal place, okay? And now I could do micropayments, I could do freaking Pico payments, I can do all these crazy payments that everyone in the traditional banking world since PayPal has been trying to do, but haven't been able to do. But ultimately, every single transaction that actually does take place, in theory, is tracked, but you want it to be private on the public record. So you never want anyone to work out that these are your transactions.
That it was me.
Right? That it was you.
There and did that.
Unless there's a subpoena for you. Now, if you do that privately yourself, it is a minefield now. Now you need to be like the guy that I was talking to you about, Gary McKinnon, the hacker, and try to work out all of these crazy ways to now maintain your privacy for buying some bread and eggs.
Well, you could say that moving into that reality should be encouraging the grassroots police investigation work. Right? Maybe at the moment there's been too much of a reliance on financial institutions monitoring as a proxy for, on behalf of, and submitting, because look, the institutions submit hundreds of thousands of reports. You know, not a small amount. It's not targeted. They're trying to make it more targeted now, right? So that we don't end up in the scenario of defensive. And if you don't report, you might get a fine. You might get dragged through the mud. Nobody wants to be in that scenario. So when I look at the whole financial crime regime, and I think it's so important that professionals like myself need to be part of not simply the aspect of monitoring, but also as part of the solution for how applications can be the most regulatory friendly solution, right? Because I mean, one of my biggest fears within this space is that what we're going to do is simply just take what we've been doing previously, currently, and we're just moving it straight into the crypto space. Yeah. And
while reducing friction points, but then you're going to have the same gatekeepers. You
can have the same gate. Everything's just going to be the same.
It's going to be the same with less friction. Yeah. But less friction for the people who we don't actually want to have less friction, to be quite frank and honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nobody likes the experience of KYC. Everybody kind of does it a little bit different. And I even read somewhere, or somebody was expressing that one of the major exchanges was having a different KYC approach to people with different names, right? So
that's messed up.
Well, is it messed up? Is it messed up though? If you have, look, when I was inside the banking world, if you are to come across, and it's so weird to say this because it's not right? But it's just a reflection of the data that you see. Yeah. Romanian scams, Nigerian scams. Not all Nigerians or Romanians are scammers, but
in terms of like the heat maps,
a huge amount of the frauds and the issues are being conducted by people of such nationalities, right? And so it's not like, but then you can't help but have that being an indicator. Therefore, anybody who will have to go through a separate level of due diligence because we don't know, right? And a lot of this is only there because we want to try and have a consumer-friendly environment, right? You don't want to become a victim of a scam. And this kind of brings us back to the idea of I'm not sure if, especially with the way that things are going right now, things may slowly start to take a different turn. But with the way that BTC is moving at the moment, I'm not sure if all of these transitions are actually showing so much more benefit to justify the pain that people are going through. And that to me is something
everything that's happening with BTC and basically the whole crypto space bar Bitcoin SV is your worst nightmare. In your field, it will end up being your worst. It really probably is. Well, but it will continue to be your worst nightmare.
Yes, but at the same time, I could potentially go and work in one of those institutions, take the same knowledge that I have and apply it
Yeah, but the technology doesn't allow you to facilitate at the level which it is that you would require and need, because you need bandwidth. You need to be able to log all interactions, because it's not just about the cells moving around in your body now. It's the cells moving around in everyone's body being counted as one body. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's what's happening, because everything is ultimately, it's all interoperable, right? It's one human being sending money to another human being, or one human being sending money to a machine who's sending money to another machine who sends money to another human being. I don't care how many people are in that loop. I don't care. Mm-hmm. Everything is traceable as one.
That's right. You know, I do think in that side of the blockchain space, they will eventually get on top of it to some degree. I do believe that they will.
We're there.
So, for example, something that I didn't necessarily like, or I didn't really agree with, was sort of the approach that some of these blockchain analysis companies were saying. You know, there's only, you know, the records are in. There's only 2% of the blockchain transactions are from criminal illicit activity.
Bollocks.
Well, only of what you know. And it was only just a couple of days ago that you had the second annual report from FATF looking at that space. And they've taken data from a number of different analysis companies, and the numbers vary from as low as 0.3 to up to 12.5% of the activity being. But the really interesting thing that they have acknowledged in their report is that because we do not have a finite list of all the addresses, we can only assume that this percentage is obviously low.
Yeah.
Right? We only know what we know. We put that caveat, we only know what we know. And it's quite funny because when I tried to take the same argument into to people who are real proponents, maximalists of BTC, I did this on Clubhouse not long ago, and you know I was accused of spreading FUD. I was kicked out of the room. You know, hundreds of people inside. And I was like, you know, there are some serious issues which people aren't even considering.
So what I liken it to, last year the Summer of Love, Portland, Chaz. In America, had all the riots, all the anarchy, BLM movement. And it's like
the autonomous zone.
That's crypto, right? They think they want a world without government. They think they want a world without law, and they think they will run it better, right?
They won't.
That Chaz, that autonomous zone, demonstrated the world of what crypto and the world would be like if the narrative won and they got their way. You will have prostitution, drugs, murder within a few weeks. You can't have
they're all human activities. What's the problem?
We need to have a system that when these human activities do happen, right? There's recourse. There's ways where
you need to have some form of redress, right? You can't just 100%. Be scammed, you know, and just have to deal with it.
I didn't say, oh well,
you know,
right?
And then it's not just oh well. It's like, well, tough. You should have learned. You should have realized that you were your own bank.
You should know code. You should know Ethereum. You should know how to do your stuff.
That's such a cold and very sad reality, and I can't accept that.
It's not right.
It's
not really what this technology is about or where it's going. It's just that people have made so much money pushing and promoting that narrative.
Yeah.
That, and also regulators naturally take a long time to catch up. And we haven't built good enough tools yet. Chainalysis is a good tool.
No, yeah,
it is really nowhere near where it needs to be in order to really alleviate more of their concerns. Ultimately, because I think even they don't truly understand the technology to the level which they should do, considering the field it is.
Does anybody? I mean,
I think people in the BSV camp really do.
I think they understand it more because obviously they listen to what Craig is saying.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Craig's quite cryptic to say the least in even his speech patterns, but he's very direct about certain things and certain principles. One of which being, this is a public record, a public ledger. There's no cryptography here. And it is there to enforce property rights. We just need systems to contextualize the enforcement of property rights.
That's right, yeah.
So, and the user experience needs to be invisible. It just needs to be completely seamless, just like you would do traditionally with Monzo. And as a user experience, and as a business case, why would you say have your money at Gravity Bank as opposed to Monzo Bank? Is because if you press a button at Gravity Bank and you got 10 grand there, you can verify that it's truly there, right? Any other financial institution in the world, you can't, right? You just have to go on faith and you have to go off trust. Then you say, okay, well, if I store my property here, I actually know that my property is here. And I actually know that because of how our technology works, we actually maintain your privacy because we can legally mix things around as a financial institution because we've gone down the regulated route.
Yeah.
But we've got to make sure that everything that has been obfuscated in terms of the public way of perceiving what has happened if when you log into your account, you see order. Outside, it's always chaos.
Okay.
But when you log in, you see order. If a regulator or someone subpoenas us, they see order.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the system it is that we need. We need that maximum benefit of having a public ledger, a public record that connects every single cell to every other cell. But when you need to see the story of how the cells evolved, you've got order, immediate order, an immediate order that you know has never been tampered with.
So here's the thing. So how much more pain do you think that the world is going to have to experience, right, before they actually start to before this becomes a common understanding?
Hello, beautiful people. So, end of part 1 of a compliance podcast with Nathan Cropper. Hope you've enjoyed the conversation. And if you have, please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And please ensure you hit that bell notification button to make sure you get the notification for part 2. And prior to part 2, if you can't wait, I definitely recommend you check out the podcast with Craig. And also, I think really relevant is our site series, as it touches on many of the issues that myself and Nathan, touched on in this podcast. And until the next time, peace, love, and light.